To find true love, he hides his wealth. She falls for him without knowing his status. When his identity is revealed, will their love survive? And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. The bustling streets of Seoul provide the backdrop for an unexpected encounter that would change two lives forever. At Uido Park, where cherry blossoms scatter their petals across winding paths, Kyung-soo stands in his carefully chosen casual attire, simple enough to maintain his facade as a cafe worker, yet well-maintained to reflect his hidden sophistication. He's there supposedly on his lunch break, though in reality, he's taking time away from his responsibilities as CEO of the prestigious SK Art Gallery. That's when he first sees Hannah. She sits cross-legged on a weathered wooden bench, her sketchbook balanced precariously on her knees. Her dark hair falls forward as she works, completely absorbed in her drawing. What catches Kyung-soo's attention isn't just her obvious beauty, but the intensity with which she studies the scene before her, a group of elderly men playing chess under the dappled shade of maple trees. Kyung-soo notices her technique. She's not just copying what she sees, but interpreting it, adding elements that speak to the emotional weight of the moment. Her strokes are confident yet sensitive, showing both skill and deep understanding of human connection. As someone who's spent years evaluating artwork for his gallery, he recognizes raw talent when he sees it. He approaches casually, stopping to pretend to check his phone nearby. After a few moments, he comments on her work, keeping his voice friendly, but not overly familiar. The way you've captured their concentration, it's remarkable. His words are carefully chosen, those of an appreciative observer rather than an art expert. Hannah looks up, startled at first, but then smiles. There's an openness to her expression that draws him in further. They begin talking about art, and Kyung-soo deliberately downplays his knowledge, asking questions he already knows the answers to. He learns she's studying art at Seoul National University, working part-time at a bookstore to help pay for supplies. Their conversation flows naturally to a nearby street food market, where they share tteokbokki and fish cakes. The spicy rice cakes warm their hands in the cool spring air as they walk and talk. Hannah's laugh is genuine when Kyung-soo struggles with particularly spicy bites, and he finds himself forgetting to maintain his careful facade. She tells him about her family's concerns regarding her choice to pursue art. "They want me to study business or law," she explains, dabbing sauce from the corner of her mouth. "Something stable, they say." The irony of her words isn't lost on Kyung-soo, who has achieved remarkable success in both business and art. When Hannah mentions the upcoming Young Artists competition, one his gallery is secretly sponsoring, Kyung-soo feels the first real pang of guilt about his deception. The competition could launch her career, and here he is, pretending to be just another supportive friend while holding significant influence over the very opportunity she dreams of. But as he watches her eyes light up describing her planned submission, he makes a decision. He'll support her journey without revealing his position, wanting to ensure that any success she achieves is entirely her own. He offers encouragement and practical suggestions, carefully masking them as simple observations rather than the professional critique they truly are. Their first meeting extends well past his supposed lunch break, and by the time they exchange numbers, both feel the subtle shift that occurs when two lives begin to intertwine. Kyung-soo returns to his gallery, where his assistant gives him a questioning look about his extended absence, but he barely notices. His mind is still with Hannah, her passionate disco science about art, and the genuine way she approaches both her work and their interaction. The foundation of their relationship is built on this day, a mix of genuine connection and careful deception that will eventually demand resolution. But for now, in these first moments of knowing each other, there's only the pure joy of discovering someone who shares your deepest passions, even if one party is holding back significant truths about their identity. The interior of Kyung-soo's chosen cafe reflects his careful planning, intimate enough for conversation but public enough to maintain casualness. He deliberately selected a small, artistic venue away from Seoul's business district where he might be recognized. Vintage jazz plays softly in the background as Hannah spreads her portfolio across their corner table, her newest works displayed with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Kyung-soo examines each piece with practiced eyes, though he maintains the demeanor of an enthusiastic amateur rather than a seasoned gallery owner. Her work shows promise, strong compositional instincts, and a unique perspective on urban life that could certainly catch the attention of serious collectors. But he has to be careful with his feedback, offering suggestions that seem born from natural observation rather than years of professional experience. "The way you capture light in this one," he says, pointing to a cityscape painted during golden hour, "it really brings out the emotion of the moment." He then gently suggests ways she might enhance the depth of her shadows, framing it as personal preference rather than professional critique. "Have you considered darkening these areas? It might make the bright spots feel even more intense." Hannah absorbs his suggestions eagerly, taking notes in a small notebook she carries. Her dedication reminds him of why he first fell in love with art himself before business responsibilities began consuming his days. As she describes her process, he finds himself sharing more genuine parts of himself, his own passion for art, carefully edited to exclude his professional involvement. Their meetings become more frequent as spring progresses into summer. They explore Seoul's hidden art galleries, carefully avoiding his own, discover quiet corners in Bukshin Hanok Village, and spend hours in conversation about everything from art history to their hopes for the future. Kyung-soo finds himself experiencing the city anew through her eyes, seeing beauty in places he'd long stopped noticing. However, their growing closeness doesn't go unnoticed. Ji-yoon, Hannah's best friend since high school, begins asking questions. A business student with sharp instincts, she notices small inconsistencies in Kyung-soo's story. The way he carries himself, his knowledge of fine dining, the subtle quality of his supposedly modest clothing, details that don't quite align with his claimed background. During a group dinner, Ji-yoon observes how Kyung-soo automatically adjusts his posture when the restaurant owner approaches, a habit born from years of business meetings. She notices how he swirls his wine with the expertise of someone well-versed in fine dining, despite claiming to be a simple cafe worker. These small tells fuel her suspicion. "Don't you think it's strange?" Ji-yoon asks Hannah one afternoon while they're studying together. He knows so much about art for someone who just works at a cafe. But Hannah, already deeply invested in their connection, dismisses her friend's concerns. "He's self-taught," she defends. "Some people just have a natural understanding of art." The tension between Ji-yoon's suspicion and Hannah's trust creates an undercurrent of unease in their social circle. Other friends begin to pick up on Ji-yoon's concerns, though they're less direct about expressing them. Kyung-soo notices the scrutiny, but maintains his composure, treating Ji-yoon with particular kindness despite her obvious distrust. As their relationship deepens, Kyung-soo finds himself struggling more with his deception. Every genuine moment between them is shadowed by the weight of his secret. When Hannah shares her dreams of someday having her work displayed in a prestigious gallery like SK Art, the irony nearly breaks his resolve to maintain the charade. The situation becomes increasingly complex as their worlds begin to overlap more. At one point, they nearly run into his business partner at a coffee shop, forcing Kyung-soo to suddenly suggest they try a different venue. Each close call adds to both his anxiety and Ji-yoon's suspicion, creating a growing tension that threatens to unravel everything. The Seoul night wraps around Kyung-soo and Hannah as they walk along the Cheonggyecheon stream. The artificial lights reflect off the water, creating an intimate atmosphere that encourages confidences. It's during this evening stroll that Kyung-soo decides to share more of himself with Hannah, though still carefully maintaining his constructed identity. He tells her about his supposed first encounter with art, a partially true story from his childhood about visiting a small gallery with his grandmother. The emotion in his voice is genuine as he describes how that experience shaped his love for art, though he omits how it eventually led him to build his gallery empire. Instead, he weaves a narrative of someone who had to set aside their dreams for practical reasons, working in cafes while nurturing their passion privately. "Art isn't just about technique," he explains, watching the play of light on water. "It's about seeing the world differently, finding beauty in unexpected places." These words carry the weight of his years of experience in the art world, though he presents them as personal observations rather than professional insight. Hannah listens intently, drawn to his passionate perspective. The conversation shifts as she begins to open up about her own insecurities. Sitting on the stream's edge, she confesses her deepest fears about pursuing art. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just fooling myself," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm not good enough? What if my parents are right about needing a more practical career?" Kyung-soo's heart aches at her vulnerability, knowing he could easily validate her talent with his professional credentials. Instead, he must find ways to encourage her without revealing his expertise. He speaks about the importance of persistence, of believing in one's vision despite doubts. His words, though carefully chosen, carry the weight of genuine care and understanding. Their emotional connection deepens through this exchange, but the moment is interrupted by an unexpected encounter with Ji-yoon. She's been following them, concerned about her friend's growing attachment to someone she doesn't trust. The confrontation that follows is tense, but controlled. Ji-yoon pulls Kyung-soo aside while Hannah is distracted by a street performer. "Who are you really?" she demands, her voice low but intense. "Something doesn't add up about your story." Kyung-soo maintains his composure, responding with gentle humor and apparent openness, though he's careful not to provide any details that might expose his true identity. "I understand your concern for Hannah," he tells Ji-yoon calmly. "She's fortunate to have such a protective friend." His response, diplomatic and measured, only increases Ji-yoon's suspicion. It's too polished for a simple cafe worker. The evening ends with unresolved tension. While Hannah remains unaware of the full extent of Ji-yoon's suspicions, the interaction leaves Kyung-soo increasingly aware of the precariousness of his position. He realizes that his deception, though begun with the intention of finding genuine connection, is creating a web of complications that could ultimately hurt the person he's growing to care for deeply. Later that night, alone in his luxury apartment, a place Hannah has never seen, Kyung-soo contemplates the sustainability of his charade. The weight of his dual life becomes heavier as he reviews contracts for upcoming exhibitions, knowing that some of these same artists might be judging Hannah's work in the upcoming competition. The evening marks a turning point in their relationship, one where the depth of their emotional connection begins to clash more severely with the reality of his deception. The genuine moments they've shared make the truth both more important to reveal and more dangerous to expose. The submission deadline for the art competition approaches, bringing both excitement and tension to their relationship. In Kyung-soo's small office at the cafe, Hannah carefully unwraps her competition piece, a large mixed media work exploring the intersection of traditional Korean culture with modern urban life. The irony isn't lost on Kyung-soo that he'll soon be viewing this same piece in a very different context. "What do you think?" Hannah asks, her voice trembling slightly with anticipation. Kyung-soo studies the piece, fighting the urge to fall into his professional critique mode. The work is impressive, better than he expected, showing technical skill and emotional depth that would genuinely stand out to the competition judges. He offers encouragement while carefully tempering his response to maintain his cover. Later that same week, Kyung-soo sits in his real office at SK Art Gallery, now dressed in a tailored suit, reviewing competition submissions with his team. When they reach Hannah's piece, he maintains a neutral expression despite his personal investment. His colleagues note the work's originality and skill, unaware of their CEO's connection to the artist. Kyung-soo contributes to the discussion minimally, conscious of not showing favoritism. The internal struggle intensifies as he participates in the selection process. He ensures all evaluations are fair, perhaps being even more critical of Hannah's work to compensate for his bias. The guilt weighs heavily as he signs the acceptance letter that will be sent to her, knowing he's playing both roles in her life, supportive friend and anonymous judge. When Hannah receives the news of her selection, she immediately calls Kyung-soo. Her joy is palpable through the phone, her voice bright with excitement and relief. They meet to celebrate at their usual cafe, where she practically bounces in her seat as she shares the news. "I can't believe they selected my piece," she exclaims, clutching the acceptance letter. Kyung-soo orders her favorite cake and listens to her excited plans for the exhibition, all while carrying the burden of his knowledge. His genuine pride in her achievement battles with his growing discomfort about his deception. Every time she mentions the prestigious SK Art Gallery, His smile becomes slightly more strained. The celebration continues into the evening as they walk through the city streets. Hannah talks about her dreams for the future, now seeming more achievable than ever. "Maybe I really can make it as an artist," she says, her eyes shining with newfound confidence. Kyung-soo feels the weight of his influence on her journey, both known and unknown to her. That night, alone in his office, Kyung-soo reviews the competition documentation again. His signature on official papers feels like a betrayal of the trust Hannah has placed in him. He begins to draft several confessional letters, each attempt ending in the realization that there's no easy way to explain his deception. The situation becomes more complex when he receives an invitation to a pre-exhibition meeting with the selected artists. He knows he'll have to find a way to avoid being present or risk exposure before he's ready to reveal the truth. The logistics of maintaining his dual identity become increasingly challenging as the exhibition date approaches. The weight of his deception reaches a critical point when Hannah begins discussing the possibility of meeting the gallery's mysterious CEO, expressing hope that our work might catch his eye. Kyung-soo's responses become more evasive, and he notices Ji-yoon watching these interactions with increasing suspicion. The pressure surrounding Kyung-soo's deception intensifies as Ji-yoon takes more decisive action. She begins methodically investigating his background, using her business school connections and social media networks to piece together information. Her protective instincts toward Hannah drive her to dig deeper than casual observation. During a charity event at a local gallery, not Kyung-soo's, Ji-yoon encounters Min-ho, a junior executive who works at SK Art Gallery. Over champagne and casual conversation, she carefully steers the topic toward the gallery's leadership. Min-ho, slightly loosened by alcohol and unaware of any connection to Hannah, happily shares stories about his boss, the young and brilliant CEO Kyung-soo. "He's quite remarkable," Min-ho says, pulling out his phone to show Ji-yoon a recent company photo. "Youngest CEO in the Korean art world, but he's transformed SK Art Gallery into a powerhouse." As Ji-yoon stares at the photo, her suspicions crystallize into certainty. The man in the corporate photo, dressed in an expensive suit, is undeniably the same person who's been pretending to be a cafe worker. The discovery sends Ji-yoon into a moral dilemma. She spends several sleepless nights weighing her options, torn between her loyalty to Hannah and the magnitude of what she's uncovered. She starts documenting everything, saving screenshots, collecting articles about SK Art Gallery, and gathering undeniable proof of Kyung-soo's true identity. Meanwhile, the relationship between Hannah and Kyung-soo continues to deepen, making Ji-yoon's decision more difficult. She observes their interactions with new eyes, noting how Kyung-soo's expertise slips through in subtle ways. His detailed knowledge of art markets, his refined mannerisms, his unconscious display of wealth in small gestures. During a group dinner, Ji-yoon watches as Kyung-soo automatically reaches for the wine list, displaying a connoisseur's knowledge before catching himself and passing it to someone else. These moments of slipping masks only fuel her determination to protect her friend from what she sees as a calculated deception. The situation reaches a breaking point when Ji-yoon discovers that Kyung-soo's gallery is not only hosting the competition, but that he personally sits on the selection committee. The implications of this conflict of interest, combined with his deliberate deception, convince her that she must act to protect Hannah. She arranges to meet Hannah for coffee, the folder of evidence weighing heavily in her bag. The cafe they choose is deliberately far from where Kyung-soo works, or pretends to work. Ji-yoon's hands shake slightly as she organizes her thoughts, preparing to shatter her friend's happiness for what she believes is a necessary truth. The weight of the situation bears down on all parties involved. Kyung-soo, unaware of Ji-yoon's discovery, but sensing increasing scrutiny, begins making mistakes in maintaining his dual identity. He accidentally mentions details about the competition that haven't been made public, then hastily tries to cover his tracks. The pressure builds like a slow-boiling pot, with Ji-yoon's knowledge threatening to overflow and scald everyone involved. She's aware that revealing the truth will hurt Hannah, but she believes allowing the deception to continue would ultimately cause even more damage. The gallery's pristine white walls and polished floors become the stage for Kyung-soo's carefully constructed world to begin crumbling. Hannah visits the gallery to submit additional documentation for the competition, unknowingly walking through the empire her supposed cafe worker boyfriend secretly controls. As she wanders through the exhibition spaces, something catches her eye, a small installation piece tucked away in a corner. The artist's statement beside it bears a familiar perspeed. Tivon art, one she's heard before in late-night conversations with Kyung-soo. The writing style, the philosophical approach, even the specific phrases mirror things he said to her. She reads the plaque, from the private collection of CEO Park Kyung-soo. Her mind begins connecting dots she hadn't previously allowed herself to see. The way Kyung-soo speaks about art with such authority, his deep understanding of gallery operations, his mysterious schedule that never quite made sense for a cafe worker. Each memory takes on new meaning under this fresh light. Meanwhile, Ji-yoon finally executes her plan. She meets Hannah at a quiet cafe near the university, away from their usual haunts. With careful precision, she lays out the evidence she's gathered. Photographs from gallery events, newspaper articles featuring Kyung-soo and his role as CEO, social media posts from gallery employees mentioning their boss. "He's not who he says he is, Hannah," Ji-yoon says gently, sliding a business magazine across the table. On its cover stands Kyung-soo in an expensive suit, the headline praising his revolutionary impact on Seoul's art scene. "He's been lying to you from the beginning." Hannah's world shifts on its axis. The magazine trembles in her hands as she stares at the photo, seeing both the man she's fallen for and a stranger simultaneously. Her mind races through every conversation, every piece of advice he's given her, now tainted with the knowledge of his deception. The betrayal cuts deeper because of its complexity. Her art submission to his gallery, his guidance that now seems manipulative rather than supportive, the competition that suddenly feels rigged. Everything takes on a darker shade. She feels like a puppet who's just discovered her strings. Kyung-soo, unaware of these revelations, arrives at their usual meeting spot later that day. He finds only an empty cafe and a message from Hannah. "I know who you are." The 3 hours he spends waiting, hoping she'll appear, become a painful exercise in confronting the consequences of his choices. When he tries to call her, his calls go straight to voicemail. His text messages remain unread. The careful walls between his two lives have not just crumbled, they've collapsed entirely, burying his relationship with Hannah in the rubble. In her apartment, Hannah tears through her sketchbook, finding drawings of Kyung-soo, notes from their conversations about art, all now feeling like evidence of an elaborate lie. She questions every moment, every piece of advice, every shared laugh. The authenticity of their connection, which had felt so real, now seems manufactured. Kyung-soo's attempts to reach Hannah become increasingly desperate. He stands outside her favorite sketching spots in Uedo Park, visits the bookstore where she works part-time, and even considers using his position at the gallery to contact her, though he ultimately decides against it, knowing it would only make things worse. Each location holds memories that now haunt him. The bench where they first met, the street food stall where they shared late-night snacks, the quiet corners of museums where they discussed art for hours. These spaces, once filled with possibility, now echo with absence. Hannah throws herself into her work with an intensity that concerns even Ji-yoon. Her art takes on a darker tone, exploring themes of deception and duality. The piece she's creating for the competition evolves, incorporating elements of her personal pain. She works through nights, fueled by a mixture of anger, betrayal, and determination to prove her worth independent of Kyung-soo's influence. Her new work captures attention for its raw emotion. Fellow artists in her program notice the shift in her style, the way she attacks the canvas with newfound intensity. The pain of betrayal translates into powerful strokes and bold color choices that she might have hesitated to use before. During this period, Kyung-soo seeks guidance from his mentor, Anel, Durley art dealer who helped him build his gallery. The older man listens to the full story in his cluttered office, surrounded by decades of collected art. "You tried to find authenticity through deception," the mentor observes, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Now you must find a way to be truthful, even if it costs you everything." Hannah's self-imposed isolation is broken only by occasional visits from Jiyoon, who watches her friend's transformation with a mixture of concern and pride. "You're channeling your pain into something powerful," Jiyoon says one evening, studying Hannah's latest work. "But don't let it consume you entirely." The distance between Kyung-soo and Hannah becomes both physical and emotional, yet they remain connected through the upcoming competition. Kyung-soo knows he should recuse himself from the judging panel, but doing so would require explaining why, potentially compromising the integrity of Hannah's participation. In his private moments, Kyung-soo visits a small gallery where he displayed his first collection years ago. The humble space reminds him of why he fell in love with art in the first place, the pure joy of creation and appreciation, unmarred by business concerns or social status. He realizes that in trying to test Hannah's authenticity, he lost his own. The city continues its rhythms around them, but both move through it differently now. Hannah avoids their old haunts, finding new places to sketch and draw. Kyung-soo throws himself into gallery work, though his staff notices his distraction and uncharacteristic melancholy. The mentor's words echo in Kyung-soo's mind as he watches Hannah's submission being prepared for display, unable to approach her, unable to explain, trapped by the consequences of his own choices. The day of the competition arrives with an electric tension in the air. The SK Art Gallery's main exhibition hall transforms into a showcase of emerging talent, with Hannah's piece commanding attention in a prime location. The lighting perfectly captures the emotional depth of her work, though Kyung-soo had to delegate the installation decisions to avoid direct involvement. The renowned art critic, Kim Min-young, moves through the exhibition with deliberate slowness, her reputation for discovering new talent making her presence particularly significant. When she stops at Hannah's piece, the room seems to hold its breath. Her careful examination extends longer than her review of other works, her notebook filling with observations. Kyung-soo maintains his distance, watching from the gallery's upper level. He sees Hannah enter the exhibition hall, her posture straight despite her obvious nervousness. She's wearing a simple black dress that he's never seen before, her hair pulled back severely, projecting professional confidence despite her inner turmoil. Jiyoon accompanies her, providing silent support and occasional protective glances around the room. The critique session begins, with each artist standing before their work as the judges provide feedback. When it's Hannah's turn, Kim Min-young takes the lead. "Your technical skill is evident," she begins, "but what strikes me most is the emotional evolution visible in your work. There's a raw authenticity here, a story of transformation and betrayal that speaks to universal human experiences." Hannah maintains her composure during the critique, though Kyung-soo can see her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Her responses to questions are clear and professional, showing no sign of the personal turmoil that inspired the piece. The other judges nod appreciatively at her articulate defense of her artistic choices. When the winners are announced, the room erupts in applause as Hannah's name is called for first place. The judging panel's decision was unanimous. Her piece stood out not just for its technical excellence, but for its powerful emotional impact. Kim Min-young personally congratulates her, mentioning potential future opportunities. Kyung-soo watches from above as Hannah accepts her award. His pride in her achievement battles with his regret at not being able to celebrate with her. He sees the tears she quickly wipes away, knowing they're not just from joy at winning. The success is bittersweet, tainted by the circumstances that helped create such powerful art. As the crowd disperses, Hannah lingers before her winning piece. In the quieter moment, her professional facade cracks slightly, and she reaches out to touch the frame of her work. The gesture is intimate, a private moment of recognition for what this victory cost her personally. Kyung-soo slips away before she can notice his presence, leaving instructions for his staff to handle the rest of the evening's proceedings. His absence from the formal award presentation will raise questions, but he accepts this as part of the price for his deception. The invitation to the gala arrives at Hannah's apartment in a thick cream envelope bearing the SK Art Gallery's elegant logo. She stares at it for a long time, knowing that attending means facing Kyung-soo in his true element. The formal dinner and award ceremony would force a confrontation she's been avoiding. Ji-yoon finds Hannah sitting among scattered drawings in her studio, the invitation still unopened on her desk. "You have to go," Ji-yoon insists, her voice gentler than usual. "This isn't just about him anymore. This is about your art, your future." She helps Hannah sort through potential outfits, finally selecting a deep blue evening dress that makes her look both professional and striking. The preparation for the gala becomes a symbol of Hannah's transformation. As she gets ready, she realizes she's dressing not just for an event, but for a confrontation with both Kyung-soo and her own feelings. The makeup she applies feels like armor, her carefully styled hair a helmet for battle. Meanwhile, Kyung-soo prepares his speech in his office, discarding draft after draft. Each attempt to explain his actions feels inadequate. His assistant reminds him of the gala schedule, noting that several important collectors will be attending specifically to see the winning pieces. The professional and personal continue to collide in ways he can no longer control. The gala begins with the usual elegant flourishes, champagne flows, soft classical music plays, and Seoul's art elite mingle among the exhibits. Hannah enters with Ji-yoon at her side, immediately drawing attention as the competition winner. She handles the initial conversations with collectors and critics with poise, though her eyes constantly scan the room, anticipating Kyung-soo's appearance. The moment finally arrives when Kyung-soo steps onto the small stage for his opening speech. The room quiets, but the silence between him and Hannah feels deafening. He stands there in his perfectly tailored suit, looking every bit the successful CEO, so different from the cafe worker she thought she knew. "Good evening," he begins, his voice carrying clearly through the gallery. "Tonight we celebrate not just artistic excellence, but truth in art." The irony of his words isn't lost on anyone who knows the full story. As he continues his speech, his eyes find Hannah in the crowd, and for a moment, their gazes lock. The ambient murmur of the crowd grows as they notice the tension between their CEO and the competition winner. People who know either Kyung-soo or Hannah begin whispering, pieces of the story spreading through the gathered crowd like ripples in a pond. Hannah stands perfectly still during his speech, her champagne glass gripped tightly in her hand. Each word from Kyung-soo carries double meaning for her, his discussion of authenticity in art, the importance of genuine expression, the power of truth. The room seems to spin slightly as the professional and personal narratives collide publicly. The tension in the gallery reaches its peak as Kyung-soo deviates from his prepared remarks. He sets aside his notes, his hands gripping the podium, as he makes a decision that will change everything. "Before we proceed with tonight's celebrations," he says, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil, "I need to address something personal." The crowd stills, sensing the weight of the moment. Hannah's face pales as she realizes what's coming, while Ji-yoon moves closer to her friend protectively. The soft lighting of the gallery seems to intensify, creating an almost theatrical atmosphere for this public confession. "Our winning artist, Hannah," Kyung-soo continues, his eyes finding hers in the crowd, "created her piece without knowing that I, the CEO of this gallery, had been deceiving her for months." The murmurs grow louder as he explains his masquerade as a cafe worker, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence that follows each revelation. "I told myself I wanted to ensure authentic connections in a world where my position often attracts insincerity," he admits. "But in doing so, I betrayed the very authenticity I was seeking." His words echo through the gallery, bouncing off white walls and polished floors, reaching every corner where the city's art elite stand in rapt attention. Hannah stands motionless, tears threatening to fall but held back by sheer will. The revelation of their private drama in such a public setting forces her to confront her own feelings about his deception. The piece that won her the competition, born from this very pain, seems to pulse with new meaning on the wall behind her. Kyung-soo steps down from the podium, making his way through the parting crowd toward Hannah. The gallery guests watch with a mixture of shock and fascination as he approaches her. "Your art," he says, now speaking directly to her rather than the crowd, "was chosen on its own merit by judges who knew nothing of our connection. Your talent is undeniable, and my deception can't diminish that." The sincerity in his voice, the public vulnerability of his confession, and the recognition of her independent achievement create a shift in the atmosphere. Ji-yoon, who has watched the entire scene unfold, sees something change in her friend's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight tremor in her held firm jaw. "I always saw the real you," Hannah finally responds, her voice quiet but clear. "I just wish you had trusted me to see the real you too." The simple truth of her words cuts through the pretense and pageantry of the evening, landing with more impact than any prepared speech. The crowd witnesses a moment of profound connection as understanding passes between them. In this public setting, surrounded by the art world's elite, they find something genuine, an echo of what drew them together in the first place. As the evening concludes, Hannah agrees to talk with Kyung-soo privately, away from the watchful eyes of the crowd. They move to the small gallery where they first met, coming full circle. Here, among the artwork that first sparked their connection, they begin the careful process of rebuilding trust, this time with all pretenses stripped away. The story ends not with a perfect resolution, but with the promise of something potentially stronger, a relationship built on truth, tested by pain, and choosing to grow despite it. Their shared love of art, which brought them together and nearly tore them apart, becomes the foundation for a new beginning.